In this video, I'll be exploring one question. Is Quentin Tarantino an auteur? Before we can answer this question, you need to know what makes someone a film auteur. Auteur is French for author, and like an author, film auteurs have almost complete creative control over the films they're directing, and their distinct and recognisable style is a part of every film they create. When talking about directors with their distinct and recognisable style, you can't help but bring up Quentin Tarantino. Every film that Tarantino has directed is dripping with his over-the-top, in-your-face style. It's not hard to see why some people just call his films Tarantino movies. I believe that Quentin Tarantino is an auteur, and I'm going to try and convince you in this video essay that he is an auteur by breaking down what makes his movies Tarantino movies. Cinematography. Quentin Tarantino's style of cinematography is quite different from most directors, because he uses some old techniques that no other modern directors use in their films. In every single one of his films, you're going to see some shots that Tarantino likes to use in all of his films. My favourite reoccurring technique are his quick zooms. This technique is when the camera quickly zooms in on something, obviously. Tarantino normally uses this shot when introducing a new character or the arrival of an important character, like Mr. Candy in Django. He also uses it to make sure that the audience's attention is focused on something important in the scene, like a character's facial expression changing. This is just one of the many techniques that you can see in all of Tarantino's films, and combining them all together makes his cinematography in all of his films distinctly his own. Storytelling and structure. Quentin Tarantino loves to tell his stories through lots of flashbacks and flash-forwards. A good way of explaining this is by looking at The Hateful Eight. The whole film is a big mystery, where we and the characters are stuck in a small haberdashery with a bunch of strangers, and
one of them fellas is not what he says he is.
This eventually builds up to a head where we think we're about to learn the truth.
I fucking knew it!
Until we suddenly have the rug pulled out from under us.
Can I kill him?
Say adios to your huevos.
This would leave everyone with lots of questions, but to answer those questions, we instantly go back in time just before the whole film, and we learn the truth about everything before we go back to where we were originally and continue the story. It's a very small example of how Tarantino likes to structure his stories. We don't know everything at the start of the film, but we will have all our questions answered when Tarantino wants us to know. Exaggerated violence. No matter who you are, there's one thing that I think we can all agree on, and that is that Quentin Tarantino makes violent movies.
What the fuck's happening? Oh,
man,
shit, man!
Oh man, I shot Marvin in the face.
Why the fuck you do that?
Quentin Tarantino's films could easily be considered some of the most over-the-top and violent films out there, and Tarantino loves it.
You know, I abhor violence in real life, and I can love it in genre, and I can love it in stories, and I can love it in novels. I love violent novels. I love violent anime, right? And I always have.
Well, it's easy to see that Tarantino loves violence. It's important to remember that depending on what sort of character is getting hurt, the violence can be drastically different. A brilliant example of this is how he handles some of the deaths in The Hateful Eight. When we're shown the massacre at Minnie's haberdashery, the deaths are far less bloody and over the top than you would expect from a Tarantino film. And when you compare these deaths to some of the other deaths in the rest of the film, you can notice something about how Tarantino uses violence. When we see innocent people die in his films, the violence is toned down or even not shown, letting your imagination fill in the blanks and paint a disturbing image. But when the bad guys get what's coming to them, Tarantino doesn't hold back, and he shows us everything, making you almost want to cheer with joy. So even though his films are full of insane amounts of violence, Tarantino knows when to use that violence and when to hold back and be much subtler. Music.
Known as Dealer's Wheel when they recorded this Dylan-esque pop.
The standout thing about all of Quentin Tarantino's films are his soundtracks. The Hateful Eight is the only one of his films to have an original soundtrack. All of his other films are full of songs that he's heard throughout his life. And Tarantino's use of music has made some songs that people might not have even known into infamous songs that everyone knows. The best example of this is when he uses Stuck in the Middle with You by Stealers Wheel in the torture scene in Reservoir Dogs.
Well, I don't know why I came here tonight. I got the feeling that something ain't right. I'm so scared in case I fall off my chair. And I'm wondering how I'll get down the stairs. Climb
The scene is probably the most well-known scene in any of Tarantino's films. One of the main things that makes it so iconic is the song.
First time an actor came in, and it wasn't even like his reading was that fantastically great, but it was the first time I'd ever heard the song with actually people acting out the scene. And me and the producer, we got chills. We just knew it was going to be awesome. It's part of the scene. It's not an abstract thing.
Even though Tarantino has a massive list of songs at his disposal, he always seems to know when exactly to use what song.
I have a record room in my house. I'm a big vinyl guy. It's in bins and it's broken down by genres and subgenres as per usual. And part of my thing when I'm coming up with an idea is to go through that record room and go through those records and to kind of find the music or the personality of a given movie. It's like I'm looking for the rhythm that this movie needs to play in. I'm looking for the spirit and the rhythm that this movie needs to play in. But that really helps me sink my hooks into, oh hey, maybe we'll make this. And it keeps encouraging me. If I've been writing for 6 hours and I need to get invigorated again, then if I know I'm going to use a couple of sequences and I think I know how I'm going to use it, then I just play those songs and I imagine I'm in a movie theater and I'm imagining a bunch of people are sitting there watching it and I'm imagining they're being affected in a positive way by what they're seeing on screen. And I just pace around the room and I play the music and I kind of close my eyes. Sometimes I don't even have to close my eyes. And I can see the shots just play out in front of each other, and I feel myself like I'm in the Cinerama Dome, or I'm in the Palais of the Cannes Film Festival, the Grand Palais, and I'm surrounded by people, and they're all loving it.
Reoccurring actors. When making a movie, Quentin Tarantino does things the way he wants to do them. And one thing he's very firm on is his choice of actors in his films.
One of the worst things that happens in Hollywood is a very uncreativeness when it comes to casting. And part of that uncreativity, that unartlessness that happens in casting, is you basically have the same names on this list that the studio makes, all right? And it's the same like list of names that are working on the high-profile films. Every once in a while somebody else gets in there, but they usually better be young. They better be a youngster, all right? And I'm not talking about Harrison Ford and Tom Hanks. I'm talking about all the way down to the character actors, the bumbling sheriff and the corrupt sheriff and his bumbling deputy.
There's a list for all of those kinds of roles.
Yeah, and it's like there's the high-profile character actor, and that's why when you go see Hollywood movies, you see the same big kind of more or less bigger name character actors in 5-6 movies. All right, and what happens is as 5 years goes on, some of them stay on that list, some of them drop off, new people come on. All right, Robert Forster didn't go anywhere. All right, he's been working, but he's way off that list, and he's doing straight-to-video movies and stuff, and some of those movies are okay, and some of them are even pretty good, and some of them are horrible, but he's good in all of them. All right, and the thing is, I don't have that list. I have a good memory. I know that Robert Forster's still there, and he's still kicking butt. All right, I know Pam Grier's still there, and she's still kicking butt. I've got a much longer list, and the only thing you need to be on that list is a good actor.
As well as getting actors he remembers from his past, Tarantino likes to reuse actors in all of his films. Actors like Samuel Jackson, Michael Madsen, and Tim Roth have all been in at least 3 of Tarantino's 9 movies. Tarantino likes to reuse actors in all of his films, and their characters in all of these films can vary drastically in each film. Samuel Jackson has been in 6 of Tarantino's films, and his roles in those 6 films range from being a main character in the story to doing a short voiceover introducing a character.
The reason for Hugo Stiglitz's celebrity among German soldiers is simple.
And after being in one of his films, actors always talk about how they would love to do more with Tarantino in the future.
Would you work with Quentin Tarantino again, or is it just too goddamn...
1,000 times.
Oh,
Thanks, Quentin.
Hey.
You the man.
Hey, man. You the man. Hey, thank you.
Yeah, I said that to Quentin on the 3rd day. I remember exactly up there in the hills next to the farmhouse, and I said, you know, and I'm grateful that you remind me of the reason why I have become an actor.
Themes. Quentin Tarantino is a director who isn't afraid to deal with themes of racism in his films.
I have a vast interest in race in this country, in the way blacks and whites have dealt with each other in particularly these last 100 years. And it's a theme that I can't get away from.
And when you consider the fact that the majority of his films are set in times where racism was far more common, it would be hard not to mention it. Films like Django and The Hateful Eight are set in times where slavery was still widespread, and Tarantino would rather show what things were like back then, instead of not acknowledging the past. Conclusion. Quentin Tarantino is without a doubt one of the most popular and well-known directors making movies right now, and it's easy to see why. He knows exactly what film he wants to make, no one will ruin his creative vision, and having that sort of creative power is what makes someone an auteur.